what's manageable and achievable in the here and now, and not, hey, I want to lose 50 pounds. It's like, what's the one thing I can start to do today to start to feel better?
Okay, so what were you doing before becoming Purely Elizabeth?
I was not always purely. So prior to starting, I was a holistic nutrition counselor.
Well, you were kind of purely always, it seems
like. And prior to that, I had worked in the handbag industry doing sales and marketing.
Okay, very cool. So you, how did you go from holistic nutritionist world to starting your brand?
So definitely not something that I had set out to create, did not have a business plan. While I was in nutrition school, I really discovered all of these unknown at the time ingredients. So these things like chia seeds, coconut oil, coconut sugar, ingredients that were not being used back in 2007. Different time. And it was kind of this big aha moment for me as I started to work with clients and recommend products to buy. Personally, I had a sweet tooth and I was always on the hunt for something like more delicious that was sweet, but everything was loaded with refined flours and sugars. And so somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, God, there needs to be a better product offering. But ultimately, I went to a local triathlon. I was a big triathlete at the time, and I went to promote my nutrition practice and try to get clients. And the night before the race, on a whim, I made a batch of blueberry muffins that I brought to the race. And more people ended up being far more interested in the blueberry muffins than they were signing up for my nutrition practice.
Wow. And so that kind of spurred the idea.
That spurred the idea. So kind of on the spot, I just flipped what I was selling. And I said, when you sign up for my newsletter, I'll let you know when the products will be available. I mean, looking back, it really must have been such a strong interest in this that it was so overwhelming that that's what people wanted instead of one-on-one holistic nutrition counseling, which if you think back to it, no one even was talking about holistic nutrition counseling back in 2008.
Totally. So what did you start to sell? Was it the muffins, or did you tell people something else was coming? What was the pipeline?
I told them muffins were coming and left the race, put it on the back burner. It was I have no idea how to start a CPG brand. What am I doing? So months went by, I didn't do anything. And then eventually I thought, you know what? I have this captive audience. I'm going to go back to the race again, still for my nutrition practice, but let me just do this on the side. This would be my side hustle. So I ended up putting together 3 muffin mixes and a pancake mix. And that is what I went to the race that following year to sell. And I ended up selling out at the race. And then several days later was contacted by Daily Candy, which at the time was the resource for anything cool and trendy. And they featured us in their email blast. And I had $10,000 of orders in 3 hours.
That's a huge deal. As a business that's just starting, and it's interesting when you have one of those moments where you're oh my God, this is it. This is crazy because I'm sure back then $10,000 was
massive.
A ridiculous amount of money when you're just starting out. That's crazy.
Crazy. I mean, I had packaging. I had gone to sleep the night before manifesting that I would get 20 orders. That's what I thought a good launch day was going to be, or what would happen with Daily Candy. And I knew that they were huge, but I didn't obviously know. So I had enough packaging for 20 orders. I had enough ingredients. I was not prepared by any means to fulfill $10,000 of orders, which it took me about 3 weeks to fulfill.
Wow. So then you got all these orders and you were just kind of figuring it out on the fly?
Completely figuring it out. I mean, I was so overwhelmed with excitement, but also I have no idea how to do this. I didn't even have a commercial kitchen. So it took about 3 weeks to get packaging, get ingredients. I mean, I was ordering Bob's Red Mill sacks of flour to my mom's cul-de-sac, and there was a tractor trailer that would come and drop off pallets. And here we were, 2 women, be what do we do with a pallet in a cul-de-sac? We were out of our league of what we were doing, but that was how it started.
So you started off with these mixes. I feel my intro to Purely Elizabeth was your granola. So when did that come along? And did you notice that there was I guess like this like cult following when it came to your granola? Because I feel like, I mean, you obviously, your range of products all incredible, but the granola is like, I think like what you guys are like most known for, at least in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. So we no longer do the muffin mixes.
Yeah.
But about 2 years into the business, one day it was cold, it was rainy. I had gotten a sample of puffed quinoa, which is quinoa's baby cousin.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be the next trendy ingredient. It never really took off. But I got a sample of it and I thought, okay, how could I use this? I wasn't going to put it into a mix because that was a weird application. So I decided to bake up a batch of granola. In truth, I had never baked granola before, and I was not a granola eater, but it just had this idea like spark into my head to make granola. So made this batch of granola for the first time. My mom was in town visiting. She was a huge granola connoisseur. She tasted my fresh batch out of the oven. She was like, this needs to be your next product. This is better than anything I've ever had. Like, don't change the recipe. And that's our original granola, which I have not changed the recipe from that day.
No way.
Yes.
You know, it's so funny. Like when I was younger, like my mom used to just pack us snacks, and the granola that we would eat was like, what was it? It's like the green packaging, Nature something.
Valley.
Yeah, that's the one. And it's crazy because it's so full of like sugar, and it's not really healthy.
No, it's not.
It's kind of crazy. And like, did you see granolas like that on the market when you came about? Like, what was kind of the strategy or thought process?
Well, looking back, it's funny because I didn't have that strategy. It's not as though I said, I'm going to get into the granola category because everything is loaded with crappy ingredients and I think that there's a white space opportunity and it's $1 billion category and X, Y, and Z. It was really that I had made this delicious product. My mom said, this should be your next one. And I knew intuitively that like this was very different than what I started to taste on the market. And I thought it was very special and unique. And as soon as I gave it to other people to taste, it was that good and that different that the reaction from people was something I hadn't experienced, I think, with the muffin mixes. And that's really when I knew like, hey, we need to focus on this and then start to delve into, okay, here's what competition looks like and look at the market. But it certainly didn't initiate from a place of there's an opportunity for better for you in this space.
So was it before or after the granola that you started to get real distribution? Because obviously now you're available everywhere. And that's actually like a very big deal for, especially for like people who are maybe just starting out. Like getting distribution is a really big deal in food and bev, obviously. Yeah. So did you have distribution ahead of the granola or was it something that happened afterwards?
So at the time I had started to get into a couple of Whole Foods regions just in the muffin mixes. And then the granola came out. And when that happened, maybe we were into 2 Whole Foods regions and certainly a couple of natural independent stores. I think we were actually in Erewhon with the muffin mixes and ended up getting in really full distribution with granola. So it wasn't until granola came out in 2011 and it wasn't until 2013 that we got into Whole Foods nationally.
How did the Whole Foods thing even come about? Because again, like, there's a lot of people who listen who are, maybe wanting to start a brand or like in the early stages of starting a brand. So how did that conversation even come about and how did you get their attention?
So it was definitely very different, I would say, how Whole Foods was then till today, although they still do have a local forager that you can get in regionally and locally, but it was much easier at the time. And so actually the story comes back to my mom. She had gone into her local store, and because we were using a commercial kitchen in Philadelphia, we were technically then a local brand to Philadelphia. I was living in New York City, so I was driving back and forth to this commercial kitchen a couple days a week, filling up my car with product, shipping product out of my Manhattan apartment, which was pretty crazy to think about. And so on one of those trips back into the city, my mom was going into her local Whole Foods and she asked the local store manager, Jamie, if he was interested in bringing product. And he said, yes, sure. Give me a free fill case. Let's see how it does. And so that was how we first got into that one store and then had to call store by store. Probably there were 40 stores in the Mid-Atlantic region to see if they were interested in bringing in the product. And they would say, sure, send me a free fill case. And I think looking back, we were just so unique at the time, where I think today, as I look at the market, like it's so much more competitive. There's so many products that it's much harder to be unique and really stand out in the category. But at the time, people didn't even know what chia seeds were. No one was using coconut sugar. So it was something that was, I think the store managers were really open to trying out this new item.
But yes, like it's true now it's more crowded perhaps, but what's also really interesting is nowadays, like from a cultural perspective, people think that like, oh, like I'm going to start a business and I'm just going to become successful, or like, oh, like 1 year pipeline, you know what I mean? Whereas what's really cool about you, and I remember we were talking about this when I went on your podcast, is that you guys are almost like 15 years old?
15. We just had our, yeah.
That's crazy. Like that's some serious longevity. Any tips for founders to like kind of build a business sustainably? Because I really do think that it's something that you've done. And, I rarely now meet founders who've been in the game for this long.
Yeah, I think, one of the things is that when I started, it was, again, a different time where there wasn't this mentality of like, you need to get in. And it's, of course, there was always competition, but it was different. And so I think from day one, I think the mentality was like, I didn't have to run to have an end result and have X success right away. And so it was always about building it slowly. And that goes across the board. Like from a team perspective, we didn't all of a sudden hire 50 people. I mean, we're 50 people today, but that's 15 years later. So it was really like methodical. Starting out, we were in 2 Whole Foods regions, then it went to 4, and then we were national after 2 years. And we started really focusing on just the natural channel where we could focus on our consumers there. And it took many years until we then went, okay, now we're going to get into Target and Walmart and really expand that distribution so that we could focus. And I think like hand in hand with that went with raising money. So at the beginning, I didn't say I want to raise a bunch of money and then again, rush to hire, et cetera. It was how long could I wait to not raise money, to do this slowly? And then eventually when we did raise money, it wasn't like, let's go out and raise a ton of money. Let's do this so that it's really in a strategic way of what we need and not kind of get over our skis in it.
And I love that you say that because I have the exact same advice for founders as well. Like we didn't raise money for like until a year and a half. We were profitable. We raised money to grow faster, not because we even needed the money. And I think when you are able to do that, number one, you have proof of concept, which kind of shows investors that you're onto something, like they believe in your vision more. But also, I think you go into those rooms with a lot more power and just like less desperate energy.
100%. You never want to be raising money when you need money.
Yeah, because I think that energy just like shows. And then I think you end up settling for deal terms, which maybe aren't the best for you when you look back on it. So I think going in from a place of like power and like not being in a rush and just like doing it the right way so that you have traction is just the smart thing to do.
For sure. I think it's also important and like you're attracting those partners with that energy.
Yes.
And so it's the same thing like in dating. Like you want to have that same energy. You're attracting someone who is like that. So ultimately, even if the deal terms are better or worse, it's to me, the most important thing was always having the partners that I had shared values with and that I was going to want to spend the time with and that I knew would have my back and be able to really be in a great partnership with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think like establishing that, it takes time. You can't do it under, I don't think like strenuous, really urgent environment because when are you getting to know them?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I think like being able to get to know someone's energy and understanding, okay, is this an aligned partnership is so important because I've had friends who've kind of raised money and then they don't like their investors. And it's like, damn, you're in it for the long run now.
It's too late for
yeah, it's too late to not like them. So, and that's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, I think you hear so many of those horror stories. And so for me, when we first raised money and the 2 times we did our Series B, it was like the most important thing is just the partner. And honestly, like the terms came secondary to me.
Agree. You also said something about retail and how your approach was almost like a stepladder approach, which I think, again, is so incredibly strategic and something that we've been doing as well. Like we were never in a rush to go into all of these stores because the thing I think people don't realize is that, say you are a new brand and, you go into like hundreds and thousands of stores, okay? Just because you're in there doesn't mean you're moving off the shelves. Right. And then you're kind of screwed.
And it's really hard to get back in.
Exactly. Like, I think retailers want to know that once they have you, that you'll also kind of move and people want to buy you.
For sure. I think one of the biggest and sometimes hardest things is being so strategic where you have to say no.
Yes.
I mean, that discipline to say no. And we still face that even today, where it's like we have a big opportunity. And while it seems like we're 15 years old, we're this bigger brand, we should do it. I mean, we're still using that discipline and saying no. And it's being uncomfortable and feeling that comfort and doing it anyway. So
I think as well, there's such power in that. And I think it's better to say no and like wait until the moment that you can do something really well than like jump into it and then like screw yourself over, sort of,
Fully.
Like, of course, like taking risks is good, but you don't ever want to be over your head and you don't want the risk to like, eat you alive, sort of.
Absolutely. I will say that we did get into Target very early on and talk about like not being able to get back in. We got kicked out. And then they did bring us back in about a year later. So there is a silver lining that sometimes you can get kicked out and get back in, but it's certainly not as easy as you think.
When they brought you back in, was it just because your brand had like more visibility and like, I guess like, more visibility?
So it was a little bit of a complicated story, but some of it was the fact that they wanted a lower price on the shelf. And so we ended up, they said, hey, if you can come back and give us a different pack size, so that we could hit this SRP, we're willing to give you another shot to come back in. So yes, we were able to do that, but I do think that it was also, here we were a year and a half later, we had that much more recognition. And so it was a great example also just about timing and it being the right time and place.
But the price point architecture that you're talking about is actually such an important consideration that I think all kind of founders who are thinking of retail need to have in mind. And it's so funny because when I think back on like year one of our business, this is stuff that I would have never considered.
Right.
But like it's now we've been in business for 4 years and like we make it a point to talk to experts who like give us these pointers. And I'm like, damn, price point architecture. Like I would have never thought of that.
I mean, it's honestly, that is one of the best pieces of advice to get right at the beginning because you have to think about everything from Costco to Amazon and everything in between. And we're still sort of fixing things that it's hard to go back and unfix.
Yeah. And so just like knowing that ahead of going into retail is like so much easier. Like even for us, like before we got into like bigger retail stores, we had to switch up our packaging because the same one that was working for D2C doesn't necessarily work for retail. So these are like all like really interesting, I think, considerations that you don't really think of because people are like, oh, retail, like amazing, let's do it.
Totally.
I'm like, no. Hold your horses. A lot of things to think about here.
It can be very complicated. And the cost of a new UPC and what all of that means.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into things about health and wellness as well because number one, this was just a topic that so many people were interested in. Number two, obviously, I want to get all your tips. So what are your tips for someone who's wanting to start to make healthier choices?
So certainly it depends on what those healthier choices are. But I always like to think about with anything, whether it's healthier choices or just something that's big and audacious that you're trying to change, it's all about the small steps. And so I think breaking it down into like what's manageable and achievable in the here and now and not, hey, I want to lose 50 pounds. It's like, what's the one thing I can start to do today to start to feel better and really get that reinforcement in your life that's saying, okay, I did this one thing. And now that I've gotten the confidence that I can do this one thing that I committed to, I can start to do the next thing tomorrow and the next thing tomorrow. So it could be something as simple as, hey, I'm going to start to walk like 8,000 steps a day. Or it can be something food-wise as simple as I'm going to start to add more leafy greens into my diet.
I love that because it's simple and you're so right. I think it builds confidence. And I think as you start to like incorporate more things into your checklist, right? And I think like oftentimes we overcomplicate what it is we need to do, like as you're saying, someone might be like, oh, I want to lose 50 pounds. That sounds really daunting.
It's crazy daunting.
It's insane. But like that result is just actually just a sum of the choices that we make on a daily basis. So if you can break it down, it's just so much more digestible.
Totally.
Can we go through your day in terms of meals? Because I'm really interested and so is everyone else.
Okay. I actually am not a big snacker. So
Same.
I typically just have 3 meals a day, unless I'm traveling, because for whatever reason, I feel like when you're on the plane, you get hungry and like snack. So, and I do travel a lot. So I guess those days I'm snacking. But on a typical day, I have breakfast and my breakfast varies. So some days I'm doing eggs. Some days I'm doing some form of like cottage cheese and granola, smoothie and granola, overnight oats and granola.
Wait, I want like a specific, like what did you have today?
Okay, well, I'm in LA today.
Okay. Well, what did you have before you came here?
Well, today I had the Alfred parfait that has our granola in it.
Ooh,
so that was
okay.
a good breakfast. Yesterday, I mean, I'm certainly very into having a gram of protein per pound of body weight right now. So I'm eating lots of protein. So doing egg white omelets with veggies. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of cottage cheese to that. Sometimes I'll put in a chicken sausage with that. Those are my savory days. And then on the sweet days, I'm either doing just cottage cheese, good culture, of course.
So good.
I mean, it is hands down like
what do they do to it? It's incredible.
The absolute best.
You can't not. I'm like if I'm not getting this, I'm just like
right,
I'm not going to get it.
Right.
No need for cottage cheese.
No, there's no secondary option. So mixing that with some fruit in our granola. I've been very into doing this overnight oats with our classic cinnamon packet, and then I blend it with a little bit of Good Culture, a little bit of Be Well by Kelly, protein powder. Soak it overnight with some water, and then add in fruit and some of our granola on top for crunch.
I've actually never tried Good Culture or any sort of cottage cheese with fruits and granola. I feel like I need to try that now.
Oh, so you've only been doing it savory.
Well, I kind of like a sweet savory combo. So what I've been doing is I usually put it on sourdough and then I'll do blackberries and a little bit of honey.
Oh, yum.
It's so good. Or if I want it savory, then I'll do the cottage cheese on sourdough and then I'll add like a little bit of chili crisp, like Fly by Jing.
Yeah.
So fucking good. And a little bit of honey. So like those are my 2 go-tos. But I love this idea of just fruit and granola.
I mean, I love it like that, like instead of doing yogurt.
Oh,
right?
Okay. What a slay. I'm going to try this.
And it's a little bit more like the sweet, savory, salty sweet. It just plays up, I think, really well.
Okay. This is going to be maybe my lunch today. It sounds really good.
And here's a good travel hack
because
I'm on the road so much.
Yeah.
So you freeze a cup of Good Culture in the freezer, take it out like an hour before you leave for the airport. You can get it through security because it's still frozen. And by the time you get on the plane, it's defrosted.
Stop it. Wait, that's really smart. Oh my God. Okay, well, I'm going to try this in the next few weeks
and then
when I'm traveling.
You've got your protein, you have some granola with it to top it. And
wow, incredible. Okay, so tell me lunch.
Lunch is typically leftovers from dinner. So I am making some sort of protein, always trying to get my leafy greens in. So as I said, as someone who's starting out on their health journey, I've always thought about crowding out by adding in.
Yes, love that.
So adding in leafy greens and adding in as many veggies as I can. I try definitely to have a variety of plants throughout the week. So trying to get those like 30 different plants, which herbs are different plants too. So it's not as daunting as we think. And brown rice or some sort of a grain with it is what I'm doing. So some sort of combination of that. Right now I've been really into making this avocado chimichurri, which is like heaven and so herby and fresh, and then just slathering it on top of whatever, either chicken or fish or steak.
Tell me what you're putting in this chimichurri.
So it's parsley, cilantro, pickled onions, garlic, lime, and avocado.
That sounds like insane. Like
it's good on eggs.
Watering.
Yeah, it's so good.
I'm also so hungry right now. Like all I want to do is like go and eat all of the things after you're telling me all this. Okay, that sounds incredible.
I've been very into making dressings and then just having that in the fridge for a week. And that really changes up everything that you're eating.
I couldn't agree more. I think like playing around with marinades and like making your own dressing they're both such hacks and so easy to do. I just have it sitting in mason jars and then it's just like, great. Like I'll just put this on my salad or I'll marinated my chicken this way. It's like so nice.
It's so nice. And then you can also just make like 4 roast chickens for the week. And
Absolutely.
make it all taste different. Add in some different nuts and seeds and add the texture to me is like a huge thing. So adding in that variety of textures.
I was I forget who I had on my podcast, but it was I think some nutritionist who was saying that how you sustainably eat healthy is like ensuring that you're hitting like the different taste buds and textures. So like making sure that there is like an element of like maybe it's if you really like sweet, like add in a little bit of sweet into your salad, like make sure you have a crunch in there. And then that way it's just, you don't necessarily have cravings for things afterwards because you're so satiated with your actual meal.
It's so true. That's why I think like having crunch and texture and that variety in there is so key. It's funny, last night I got in late to LA and I got Goop Kitchen delivered.
Oh, so good.
Which is so good. And I think that's one of the things they do so well is that variety. It was like puffed rice and slaw and this and that. It's like, that's what you need.
Yeah, it's truly the best. Have you tried their chopped salad?
No.
I don't even like chopped salad. But their chopped salad is something so good. Like I can't even explain. They have like the sweet, the crunchy, the all of the things. I'm like, this is perfect.
It's perfect. Chef Kim is amazing.
It's so good. So good. Okay, what are your non-negotiables from a routine standpoint?
Definitely non-negotiable is working out first thing in the morning.
Ooh, okay.
If I don't move my body in some way, and it doesn't have to be like a crazy workout. It could just be even walking, again, trying to get 10,000 steps in a day. But I absolutely have to move my body. If I don't, definitely feel out of sorts.
And what kind of workouts do you typically like to do?
So typically I'll do strength training.
Love.
I'm
a girl after my own heart.
Yeah, I am definitely on that bandwagon. I used to definitely be a big cardio, like Peloton. I still love doing the Peloton, but SoulCycle Peloton, that was my jam. And now I'm doing that like once a week.
Yeah.
And strength training probably 4 to 5 days a week on a normal week, I would say.
Wow, that's incredible. And you do that first thing in the morning?
I do it first thing in the morning. So I go to sleep on the earlier side. I'm getting up at like 5:36.
Wait, what time are you sleeping?
Like 9.
Okay.
Getting in bed at like 8:30. But this is like if I'm not going
out. This is
out.
goals. Wow, I love this.
If I'm just home and not doing anything, I'm like, I don't need
may
to.
As well.
Right. Why not? And I know that I am naturally a morning person. So like my body just wants to get up early. If I went to sleep at 10:30, I'm still going to wake up at 5:30.
Yeah.
So I need to get my 8+ hours of sleep.
I'm totally with you. I went to bed last night at 11 because I never do this, but we were watching. So I'm obsessed with Lord of the Rings. This is like fun fact about me, and the Rings of Power. That's like the new thing on HBO. So season 2 is out, and we finished one episode, and it was like perfect bedtime. And Nisha's like,
one more.
Okay, well let's just do one more. And I'm like, fuck, but it's so good. I better. Okay, and so then I did it, and then like ended up staying up late, and I still woke up as usual at 6:30, and I'm like so tired today. I'm like, why do I do this to myself?
But how good was it?
Oh my God, it was so good. I like, honestly, all I can think about is because I work out in the evenings, I walk in the mornings, and I'm like, all I can think about is just like watching the new episode while eating my dinner tonight. Like I truly cannot wait.
That's so fun.
I will not stretch it till like 10:30, 11, but it's going to be a 7:30 p.m. Fun times. Okay, so working out, non-negotiable.
So working out is my non-negotiable. I really also thrive in having a slow morning. So I am not, working out and then like rushing getting into the office. I'm working out and then I'll go on a walk outside with my dogs. I'll have my breakfast, like really trying to not feel rushed in the morning. And whether that also means like setting time to really think about my intentions for the day. I used to do some form of like 5-minute journal or mini meditation, but I think right now I've been feeling good. So I've just been kind of going with it and making those thoughts happen on a walk.
Yeah.
I was never a nighttime routine person, but now I'm really into having a night routine, which I think has been helping me just feel better in the morning too.
What's your night routine?
Night routine, I mean, we'll see what happens now that it's getting darker, but it was always this summer about like going on a long walk at night and then going in the sauna. And the sauna to me is just like heaven, relaxation. Like you're just in this cocoon that feels
so
like. So that's been my night routine.
I love that.
And reading in the sauna.
Oh, I love that. I read before bed and I feel like fiction specifically, and I feel like it's such a game changer for quality of sleep because
Yes.
I feel like that's kind of how I bookend my day. And that way I'm not thinking about work before I'm going to bed. I'm just kind of going to bed thinking of something that's fictional. It's
I
just
love
nice.
that too. I used to never read fiction books. I was everything I read was business books or
Yeah.
like self-improvement, some sort of nutrition, something on this topic.
Yeah.
And about, I don't know, a year ago I started to read fiction and it's like
It's a game changer.
Game-changing.
I can't do the nonfiction before bed. And I think like it's funny because so many people have gone through the same thing. And I remember I was like that as well for a bit. And it's funny because I grew up reading a ton of fiction. It's like I've been reading a ton since I was little. But, you know, when I started Array, I was like, I felt guilty for reading fiction. I was like, oh, I'm wasting my time. And now I'm like, no, this is actually my wellness, like self-care practice before I go to bed. I have better sleep.
Totally.
So
yeah,
pays off. Okay, so I want to move on to audience questions. The first question is, how do you source the ingredients for your product and find a good manufacturer?
Great question. So, you know, most of our ingredients are coming from all over the world. We don't have the luxury. I mean, it would be so amazing if they were all in our backyard and they were local and we could go and visit all of them, but they really come from all over the world. So it's taken a long time to be able to set up the supply chain. And we have now been able to go and visit our farmers in Canada. And I've gone to our coconut sugar supplier in Indonesia, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
But really, you know, the logistics of we met them originally at a trade show. And so as you start out, or for someone who's thinking about it, it's like you can find people online, but really meeting those people at an industry event is where we were able to find those resources and start to build those relationships. And then same with the manufacturer. You know, there's actually not that many manufacturers like you would think. Oh, there's so many, but you know, at least in our space, in the granola space, which is baking, it's not that complicated, so to speak. There's not that many manufacturers, so we, you know, sort of know them all and have met them at a show here or there, or you know, originally on an online search. But again, it all comes back to partnerships, and like we talked about with investors, it's really finding those partners who share a similar vision and can support the brand.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Can you give us an inside look into how you formulate your product? Are you still super involved?
Super involved. So definitely my favorite part of the business is product innovation. It's come in so many different forms and fashions and certainly evolved. You know, back in the day, it was like I had an idea, I would get in my kitchen. A week later, we'd send off the sample to Whole Foods in a white Ziploc bag, and that would be that. Now we have a much more extensive process. We do have an R&D team that is helping immensely and still certainly like way involved in creating the product and ideating on new concepts.
I love that. What are your tips for building community?
So I think a lot of that is around being open and authentic and like really listening to what our community is looking for, wanting, and being open to talking to them about it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with you. I think that open dialogue and also people just feeling like they're almost a part of the brand story. I think that that's really important because I think involving your community in the direction of your brand is just, it's so important.
Yeah. I mean, people love that.
Yeah.
It's like they want to be heard and they want their thoughts and opinions to matter. And so how do you really take that into consideration?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your number one tip for someone starting a food brand?
Just go for it.
Love. Couldn't agree more.
I mean, really, I as we said at the beginning, like I didn't know anything about starting a food brand. And here we are 15 years later. And so don't let that part of you stop you and really ask as many questions as you can. I think people in this industry are so kind and willing to share information. And so I would say go for it and just ask as many questions.
Yeah, I think just like putting one foot in front of the other. I think, you know, when you think of like starting a business, I remember when it was, you know, I thought of Array conceptually, I was like, how is this even going to become a thing? And you like literally just put one foot in front of the other. And then before you know it, like so much is happening and like you have a company.
Yeah, it's like you could never have thought, like looking back, God, how did we get here?
Yeah, it's insane. Okay, last question. This is very specific. What is your favorite gluten-free dessert?
Oh, favorite gluten-free dessert is a berry crisp.
Ooh, wait, tell us more.
So you can use our granola to make the topping, or you could make it not with our granola, but some sort of a berry combination, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, some coconut sugar, some lemon as the base, and then topping it with either a granola or a combination of like almond flour, oats, coconut sugar, some ghee, maybe some nuts mixed in there, and it's heaven.
That sounds incredible.
Baked in the oven, 350 for 30 minutes.
It's
easy, healthy, and delicious. Put a scoop of ice cream on top.
Oh my God, I have all of these meal ideas. I'm going to go do all of them. Like tonight you'll see me with my berry crisp. Oh my gosh. Elizabeth, this has been amazing. Tell everyone where they can find you.
You can find us at purely_Elizabeth on Instagram, purelyelizabeth.com, and then at retailers nationwide.
Also, what's your favorite product? Like if someone is new to the brand, what's the one product they should try?
I mean, our original granola is obviously the OG. It's a classic, but our chocolate chip cookie granola right now has my heart.
Ooh, yum. Wow. Okay, hot tip. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.